My name is Zach with Realize the Market, and you're tuned in to the Think Realize the Market podcast. Our goal is to connect with entrepreneurs by providing a platform to help others through their experience. Today, we're coming to you live from the Dallas Small Business Expo with a very special guest, Howard Kline. Howard, how are you today?
I am fine. Getting a little tired standing on my feet all day long.
Yeah, I must say it's pretty cold in here too.
Well, that's what my wife would say, but I've got plenty of insulation, as my mother would say.
There you go. So for everybody listening, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Well, I am a mediator and arbitrator.
Okay.
I've been an attorney licensed in California for 47 years. I think I'm going on 47. It's so long that I've lost count.
There you go.
And I've gotten into the mediation and arbitration because I've frankly gotten fed up with the court system. Mm-hmm. It's a great alternative to filing lawsuits and dealing with that. And as an attorney representing one side or the other, I mean, as long as I've been doing it, you feel like a foot soldier, right, beating up on the other side and taking some hits yourself. It's a highly stressful job. Mm-hmm. And now I'm to the stage where I'd rather get people to collaborate and try to resolve their disputes quickly and cost efficiently. Mm-hmm. Either through mediation, which is where the parties reach an agreement. I just help them converse, right, in essence, or arbitration, where I, in essence, act as a private judge.
Gotcha. So, you mentioned it being a very high stress level position that you're in, and I can definitely imagine doing that for 47 years. How have you managed to keep your stress levels at bay or just manage them?
I used to have a full head of hair.
That's what helped? That's what helped with the management?
I started out with a full head of hair.
Right.
I now wear glasses, although you can't see them. I started law school without the need of glasses, and by the end of my first year, I needed glasses. There have been times where I've tried to leave it, but they keep dragging me back. You ever see The Godfather?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's afforded... I've learned a lot. It's been a wonderful life and a wonderful profession. And I'd like to think that I've matured over all of these years. But it really is stressful. And there are times where it's just very difficult. You live and die with the successes of your clients. And it's hurtful when you don't obtain as much as they want. And it's a feeling of incredible exuberance when you do really help people who really need your help. So I'll miss that part of it, but I'll be, as a mediator, I'll feel very good about helping people resolve their disputes. I mean, can I give you an example?
Please do.
We had a mediation a few weeks ago, and I can't go into the details because it's confidential. Yeah. But the first mediation session, and you can have multiple ones, I had a co-mediator, and we were really trying to brainstorm with them, and they were really at odds. But we were able to come up with enough ideas where they're the ones who decided that, they need to investigate some of these possible solutions and come back the following week. My co-mediator and I were absolutely certain it wasn't going to happen. They weren't going to come back. But we showed up the following week, and they both showed up. That was our first surprise. The second surprise was when one of the parties said, "This isn't going to take long." So I immediately thought, okay, we got nowhere.
Yeah.
Says, no, we got together and we worked it all out.
Wow.
And they said, no, we don't have to put it in writing. We're like best friends now, and we're working it out. And that was the end of it. And when we debriefed, my co-mediator, I debriefed, She said to me, well, we really failed. And I said, au contraire. We were really successful.
Right.
I couldn't imagine being any more successful because we got them to talk and resolve their dispute. And that's really what mediation is. As a mediator, I'm only in control of the process. The parties are in control of the solution.
Right.
So it's almost like being a psychologist, where you're trying to identify what their problem really is. Not what they say it is, necessarily, but what it really is. And if you can start identifying it, you can start asking questions or coming up with possible solutions. I call it brainstorming, where you start going, oh yeah, I don't have to win. I can take care of things that way. And that's the beauty of mediation and why I love doing it.
Well, it sounds like, you said that you don't necessarily solve problems, but in some way you have to be a great problem solver to be able to think of these types of alternative solutions that you can bring to the table that could possibly solve their problem if they see eye to eye. So how did you become such a great problem solver?
Dealing with problems that I had no choice. I don't know when I became a problem solver, but I know that when I was General Counsel for a national company called Allied Education Corporation, all of a sudden everybody came to me with these unsolvable problems. And it was like, wait, I'm a lawyer. They didn't teach me this in law school. Okay. And I can remember times people would walk into my office, which was a corner office, very nice. And just as they closed the door behind them, I would sit there and think to myself, how the hell am I going to solve this? I mean, you wouldn't believe what appeared to be non-legal problems that they just came to me and said, we don't know how to handle this, you handle it. And I loved helping people. So if you gave me a problem, I don't care how hard it is, give me the time and I'll solve it. And I'm a very creative person. People don't think of attorneys as being creative, but many of us are. And I really relished the job. And so, at times perhaps I become a little lazy and don't focus as much as I should to solve the problem, but I'm always thinking of what's the best way, what's the most efficient way, how much can I squeeze out of this to get this done as fast and as inexpensively as possible. And that's the way my mind goes. And I guess it's after 47 years of thinking that way, I don't solve everything. Let me give you an example.
Yes, please.
Just last night, we had a rental car.
Okay.
And I was trying to hook up my Android Auto to automatically give me directions on the car. And 10 minutes into it, I couldn't figure it out. Now, I'm very technologically savvy. And so I told my wife, listen, let's pull over, sit in the parking lot, and I'm going to sit here till I figure it out. And I said, that logo there, that's an Android Auto logo.
Yeah.
So I hit it a few times, nothing happened, and then I pressed it.
You held it down. Sometimes it's the simplest solutions. You just got to take the time to stop and think about it.
That's right. I know that's a weird analogy, but that's kind of, if I'm lazy, I'm just going to try to work around it.
Yep.
Or if I say stop, I can usually solve it.
In a situation where you are, thinking about, let's say, solving the problem, and then you go into a solution, and that solution that you think is the solution is taken too long, right? would you ever be in a position to restart? So let's say you spend 10 hours on something.
Oh, yes.
And then you say, okay, let's just scrap it and throw it all out the window. Has that happened? And do you find that effective?
Oh, absolutely. There are a lot of things that I've done as a lawyer, like reviewing a 90-page lease.
Uh-huh.
And somewhere along the lines, you forgot what you read in the last 10 pages. And you go, huh? And so you go back and you try it again. And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't stick, you write some notes, you mark it, and you go back to it later because your brain can only handle so much. There may be people out there whose brain is much more tolerant than mine, and I am getting a little bit older. So yeah, sometimes walking away, and there have been times where someone has suggested something to me and I went, no. And then all of a sudden, a month, 2 months later, I go, what a great idea.
Right.
Guess how we can apply it. And I'm embarrassed that I didn't think about it in the first place. But yeah, sometimes allowing your brain an opportunity to work, if you have the time to do that. Sometimes you have to make decisions or find solutions faster than that, but I prefer to think about things. I can think quickly if I have to, but I hate leaving something on the table. And even representing legal clients now, I just had an idea last night in the shower for one client. That's where I do some of my best thinking.
That's the best
that is
thinking.
the best
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Think tank.
Yeah, and all of a sudden I went, and I texted him and I said, I know this sounds crazy, but have you thought about doing this? And of course his response was, well, how am I going to do that? And I said, well, don't worry about how. Just, if you'd consider it, I'll figure it out. There's always a way to get things done. Maybe too expensive. It may be too time consuming. But there's always a way. So let me look at it, and if you'll consider it, this might work.
Have you ever been in sales?
I've been selling myself my entire adult life.
I ask because the things that you're talking about to me are strikingly in line with a lot of, sales tactics that people do. And I don't even want to say sales tactics, but just understanding a problem and trying to figure out how to solve it in a way that benefits both sides. I think there's a lot of similarities there between obviously sales and kind of what it is that you're doing. So I was curious if you had any insight on that.
The thought process is the same for almost anything. That's the beauty of being a lawyer. When you're a lawyer, if you're a good lawyer, you spend a lot of time breaking things down instead of saying it's one big box. What you do is you say, well, it's a big box that has 100 smaller boxes in it. And you actually have to go through the process of thinking it out. Sometimes, as a lawyer, again, sometimes your brain gets a little lazy. So you have to step back a little bit and say, I really have to think about this particular aspect of it. I'm handling a case where unfortunately my client had an attorney that missed something really big. And I almost missed it.
Wow.
I had to handle something afterwards, and I had to look at an ordinance, and I'm kind of going, I remember this ordinance changing about a year ago. I'm probably wrong, but let me go out and read everything very carefully. And there it was in black and white. I'm going, this is so obvious. I'm really concerned that I'm wrong. Because how could it be so obvious to me and everybody else miss it?
Right.
So there's always that self-doubt going, it's that obvious. In my new podcast called Uncommon Sense is a lot about things like that. I was going to call it common sense, but then I thought if it was so common, I wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be common,
And-
but it's not.
Honestly, the simplest solutions are uncommon,
And
right? Because people overthink
Yeah.
what the solutions. So
that's- I was about to say, it's the simplest solutions are typically so overthought that people make a simple problem into a much more difficult one.
Yeah, one of my weaknesses as an attorney is that I'm so focused on solutions that other people don't think about that I overlook the most obvious thing. Actually, this one issue was not so obvious. It just so happened that I remembered something that happened in June of last year. But as an attorney, what I did was work with other lawyers and staff who weren't as imaginative as me and who really focused on the obvious. I mean, as a business person, you got to identify your strengths and your weaknesses and work with people who could strengthen you by focusing on your weaknesses, as an aside.
So let's talk about your podcast a little
Yeah.
bit. You mentioned, how long have you been doing Uncommon Sense?
I'm just starting it.
Okay.
I have been doing CRE radio and TV since December of 2010,
Okay.
where I started as an online talk show. Forgot the name of the business that did it. It's still around, where people could call in. My first show had 500 listeners. On the first live show, we fielded questions. My guest was terrified. I was pretty unsure of myself
Yeah.
to begin with, but I'd done live theater, so it was just kind of like someone would call in and ask a question. You have no idea what the question is,
Uh-huh.
but it just spills out of your head.
Yeah.
And I realized I've been doing this so long that I guess I do know what I'm talking about. So I've been doing that, and it kind of went from that to videos, to a form of live streaming, to now a combination of everything. And I had been writing articles and blogs from long before then. Even before the web, I used to write articles in business journals. So I used to use that as a form of marketing myself as an attorney. And it's just online and social media now is just another form of what I've been doing my entire career, except now it's changing so fast that I'm constantly having to learn new things, such as not just YouTube, but YouTube Shorts, and how the audience is changing and how to be more effective in what I do. So I've been doing it quite a long time. So CRE radio and TV, just to get back to it, and I'm still doing that, focuses on commercial real estate.
Okay.
My new live stream or show, I still call it a show, is Uncommon Sense, which is much broader about business and anything that might relate to business, where I intend to do interviews. I'll be doing a bunch of interviews from people here at the Small Business Exchange. And also we're going to be talking about topics from books that I've read, such as Start With Why, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that I've listened to maybe half a dozen times, and each time it gets me thinking. Trying to think how to influence people.
How to win friends and influence.
Thank you. How to win friends and influence people. How to remember what you're talking about. How to win friends. You can take just one small portion of that and have it apply to anything in business. What you do in marketing, what people do in podcasting, what people do in law. And basically it's how to think and deal with people.
Yeah, personally, that book changed my life. I think the principles outlined in that book, for me, my experience was, it's kind of common sense. Like a lot of these things I knew already, but I don't think about them. I don't think about them when I interact with people, and I don't keep the principles that the book talks about at the forefront of my mind when I have interactions. And when I started to do that, my relationships changed, which brought more opportunity to my table, which in turn started to really shift my reality. So books are really powerful, and that's one of my favorite
that kind
ones.
of book is, and it's a great book. It's a great book to reread because you kind of lose that glue after a while, and then all of a sudden you read it again, and while you remembered what you had previously read, it just kind of brings it back to the forefront of your mind again and really helps. I don't know if it was in one of the books, but one of the things that I've done over many years is take an annual sabbatical where I sit down and go over everything that I'm planning for the future year and how to go about doing it. Might have learned that in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what it does is it refocuses me. Because you get so caught up in life and business that you lose that focus. But when you reread and redo that stuff, it kind of gets you back in line.
And apply it. It's the biggest thing, right? Because what started my personal journey was reading 300 plus books. And before this time, I had read 2 or 3 books my whole life. And within I was 18, 19 years old, and within a few months, I just sat at home and just read. I spent thousands of dollars on just some of the biggest books, right?
Wow.
And one of the things, after I broke out of my incubation phase, one of the first things that was taught to me, I went and worked for DirecTV for sales. One of the first things that was said to me by my boss there, essentially, which turned to be my business partner afterwards, he looked at me, he said, Alex, because my head was this big, it couldn't fit through the doorway, right? I just had all this information, I didn't know how to apply it, right? And he said, Alex, you can have all the information in the world, but it doesn't mean anything unless you know how to apply it. So, in that sentence, how would you recommend other people to obtain information and then apply it?
Well, I think YouTube has changed the world
Yeah.
because I heavily rely on YouTube.
Okay.
And I'm constantly watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, reading books. I often listen to books. I think it's on Audible. I usually, and I re-listen when I do that, and I find that you can learn that stuff, but then you have to go out and experience things. You got to fall on your face. You got to make mistakes. One of the things I tell my kids is that they should only grow up to make as many mistakes as I have. I do not hold myself out as a perfect person. Lord knows I can't do that. One of my, I became general counsel of a supermarket chain in San Diego when I was 28.
Okay.
And I'm being interviewed by a guy who is worth a lot of money. He ended up owning a couple of, had one of the largest thoroughbred ranches in the world, had a couple of Kentucky Derby winners, best pal, and owned an interest in a lot of horses, which had nothing to do, by the way, with the supermarket.
Did the supermarket sell horse feed?
No. Well, we ended up forming a insurance company called Golden Eagle Insurance, which started out as a horse mortality insurer because he knew all the sheiks and the big names who owned horses. But in my interview with him, he asked me, and I had never heard this question before, he said, what can you improve upon the most? Or what do you wish that you could do better? I said, well, I just spent the last 10 years of my life being a lawyer. And, or not quite 10 years at the time. And I said, I've read a lot of books and I've learned a lot. But I've also learned that the one thing that I can't replace is 20 years worth of experience. I didn't know how great an answer it was at the time. I'm going, what a stupid answer. Well, that sold him on me because he was not college educated, but worth a lot of money. And he really valued that in himself, that he was self-taught and that you could learn things from books, but sometimes you just got to go out there and experience it.
That's the biggest thing. Falling. We definitely learn off the things we do, but we learn off of the things that we do wrong the most, right? Doing it right is fun, and it releases dopamine, and we have a good time, and we celebrate. But in reality, what did you learn, right? How to celebrate. But whenever you fail, you don't go out and celebrate, right? You go out, you fail, and then you go back to the lab, and you digest what went wrong, and you tweak your stuff, and then you go back out again and you try it.
Well, that's the real smart way.
That's the smart way. Yeah.
On my failures, I've cried.
Yeah. Well, that comes first.
I've cried. I've punished myself.
Yep.
And then I've bounced back.
Yeah, but you keep going.
Yes.
And this kind of circles me back to something you mentioned earlier, the first book you read being Finding Your Why. So what is your why? What's the reason that keeps you going through all of the failures that you've experienced? And has your why changed over time?
I was a mediocre student at best, and that was even through law school. Yet I found myself to be a lifelong learner. I don't know how that happened. Honestly, I never pictured myself in that way. So learning is one of my whys, but not really. I think I love helping people. I get my jollies. So I volunteer a lot. When I say volunteer, if you ask me how to help you with your podcast, I'm not going to charge you. I'm going to spill out what I've learned and help you in any way that I can. And if it comes back and helps me, great. If not, made me feel really good. I like doing it without expecting anything back. Now, if you want to hire me as a lawyer, I expect you to pay.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Or as a mediator, I expect you to pay. Or as an arbitrator, I expect you to pay. But if you just need a helping hand, I'm glad to share my knowledge. And that's what being an influencer on social media, in my opinion, is all about, is helping each other out.
I think that's something that we go along to, and we really resonate with in ourselves, is because we do the same. We do the same with businesses whenever it comes to marketing. And a business will say, hey, how do I run SEO A to Z? We'll tell them how to run SEO A to Z, because our secret of knowing isn't our secret, right? Our secret of knowing, the only thing that makes us different between what we know is how we do it, right? Because once we teach people, or even just tell them how to do it, now they have to go do it, right? So you could tell them everything you know, but it doesn't matter because now they have to apply it, right?
It's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
And I know that because on my podcast, I do everything. I do the video editing. I do the call sheets. I plan everything out. When I do a live stream, I have scenes laid out. I pre-interview everyone so that I know what the topic is going to be and what we're going to be talking about. There's a lot of time spent. And then I have to market it, and I'm flat out of time, and I know what to do.
Yep.
I just don't have the time to do it. It's easier for me to have someone like you do that stuff for me, and you're probably far better at it than I am.
There's one thing that sticks with me, and one of my mentors, Ty Lopez, he taught us this, and he says essentially if you're bad at something and you find somebody who's good at it, you're not so bad at it anymore, right? And people want to still go from, oh, well, I'm bad at this, well, then I can become good, right? Well, the time that it takes to go from bad to mediocre is way more time than it takes to go from good to great. So if you understand that you're bad at something and then you go and focus on something that you're good at, you're going to get more results out of focusing on something you're good at to getting it to great than if you focus on something that you're bad at and getting it to mediocre.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to pick your battles, right? We all have 24 hours in a day, and a fourth of it we have to sleep and hang out with family, right? So in some situations, we have to really take that time that we have and use it to the best of our abilities and not just do everything that we think we can do.
Spoken like a wise man. You're far too young to be that wise.
Well, it comes with the trial and error, right?
Yeah.
The going out and applying the information.
It's not so easy to make that shift.
No, it's
Because
not.
if you're a small business, you're always watching your nickels and dimes. But at some point, since I charge as an attorney on an hourly basis, I know the value of my time.
Yeah.
So I'm going, okay, if I'm going to take the time off and spend time with my family and relax, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars per hour. It's well worth it. I need to relax. I need to rest. I need to spend time with my grandchild. I need to do this and I need to do that, and I don't care what it costs me, but I know what it costs me. So if I give someone, if I'm really, really busy as a lawyer or a mediator or arbitrator, and I give someone a hefty discount, problem is the people who are paying me what I deserve, they may not get the full value of what they're paying for. So you have to watch out for that.
I totally agree. I like that. And sometimes you can fall into the situation of over-promising, right? And then the people who are paying you well, you kind of leave them on the back burner because you've over-promised over here and got paid less, but you still have to do the work, because it's in our blood to not leave people hanging. So overcommitting is definitely a problem, especially whenever you're really passionate about what you do. It's easy to overcommit.
I've done that, and I've punished myself because I started seeing the quality of my work diminish. And that's torture. It's like, Howard, I went to a client and rushed a contract to him, and they looked at it and had all these spelling errors, and he was not happy. And I'm going, Howard, how could you do that? But again, I'm not perfect.
And it's about allowing yourself though to kind of lower your pride and take those hits for yourself and to get back up and keep moving and not make the same mistake twice. If you're able to identify kind of where you took a misstep, it's important to own that so that you come into the next situation as a better person because of the missteps that you had before. Those missteps don't make you a bad attorney. They don't make you a bad person. But I would think continuing to repeat those mistakes over and over again, I'm not going to say makes you a bad person, but it's not making you a better one either.
Well, part of running your own business or your own department or something like that is all of a sudden experiencing a mistake and then going, well, how did that happen? And then figuring out a way, setting up a system. People hate systems.
Yeah.
But you set up, in a law practice, you set up systems to avoid the mistakes that you already made. So I was negotiating 2 leases, one in Jacksonville and one in Detroit, where I think we'd already executed the one in Detroit. And so this was at a time, this was in the 80s. So everything was done by mail. So my secretary at the time everything was printed and ready to go out. She would wait until the end of the day and then copy it and then put them in the envelopes and send it out. Well, what I sent to the Detroit landlord was not the nicest thing in the world. And what I was sending to the Jacksonville landlord was part of the negotiation of a new lease. Well, she put the nasty to the prospective landlord and vice versa. And I found that out and I said, how could you do that? Well, tell me what the process was. And I said, okay, from now on, when I give you something, you make a copy there and put it in the envelope. Then you don't lay out a whole bunch of stuff at the end of the day where that could happen. So that's changing a system.
Yep. Process is everything. process is everything. So I love the directions that we went here. I love, how we went from, just mindset to some business tips, even to some podcast tips. So I want to give the viewers and the listeners a chance to reach out to you if that's okay.
Sure.
So how would our viewers and listeners be able to contact you, whether it's, maybe to be on your podcast, maybe to hire you as a lawyer, just get some friendly advice? Where would they contact you?
Well, I am limiting the amount of work that I do as a lawyer.
Yeah.
To contact me, you can contact me for the mediation and arbitration service, which is Howard at T as in Tom, K as in Kline, G as in group, A as in Albert, D as in David, R as in Robert.com. That's TKGADR. ADR stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution. Or you can call me at 702-706-4433. That's 702-706-4433. You can tell that I've been on radio.
Oh, just a little bit. Just a little bit. You got some practice in
That
that.
was very polished.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Howard. We do appreciate your time and sitting down with us. We loved hearing your story and getting some knowledge from you, and we really appreciate it. And I know the thinkers are back at home watching and listening to this, whether in the car or at home, really appreciate it as well.
Great.
Awesome.
Gentlemen,
Well,
thank you very much.
Yes.
You'll hopefully send to me a copy,
Yes, absolutely.
and then I will splash it out all over the place,
All right.
including YouTube Shorts.
Awesome.
Guys, you take care.
All right. Thank you, thinkers.